The NFL draft held in 2005 isn't highly remembered as one of the greatest of all time. In fact, you could argue that 2005 had more misses than hits in the first round. However, despite the low that came with this draft, there was one hot topic of conversation. Who would go number one? Everyone knew San Francisco, who were coming off one of their worst campaigns in history with a 2-14 record, would take a quarterback. Now, while many thought it would be the now future Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers, the 49ers would not only skip on Rodgers, but Rodgers would ultimately fall all the way down to the 24th pick. But that's a story for another day. The Niners would draft Utah quarterback Alex Smith with the number 1 overall pick. Smith has had a very up and down career, to say the least. It's a career that I'm particularly interested in deep diving into, as for a short while, or maybe for a while, it looked like this guy was a bust in the NFL before he was able to turn it all around. Whether it was due to injuries, a revolving door at head coach, and especially at offensive coordinator, you never would have guessed that this guy would have had a career as long as he did. Smith carved out one of the most unique careers a former number 1 overall pick has had. What it do, ladies and gentlemen? This one is going to be a good one. I really enjoy doing the research on this guy because for a very long time, I really couldn't tell if Alex Smith had a really good career or not, especially when you compare him to other number 1 overall picks. While yes, maybe his time with the 49ers could be seen as a bust, it's hard to argue that he was, because he was actually turning it around, but that's exactly when they traded him. If you guys could like and subscribe, it would do me a huge favor, as there's a lot of time that takes into doing research and especially to edit these videos, so I'd appreciate any support that you guys could give me. Other than that though, hope you guys enjoy, and let's start at the beginning, as we always do. Alex Smith was born on May 7th, 1984 in Bremerton. In Bremerton, in the state of Washington. By an early age, however, his family would move to La Mesa, California. Smith, with the help of his father, Douglas, would earn the starting quarterback position in high school by his junior year and would have a 25-1 record between this and his senior year. While Smith was doing his part for sure, it didn't hurt that he also had Reggie Bush at this time as his running back. With a plethora of colleges to choose from, the senior class president would then decide to commit to playing for Utah. Only playing for 2 years in college, he would post a 21-1 record. While Smith was great, he was absolutely great, it was still a toss-up who would actually be the first quarterback taken between himself and Aaron Rodgers. New head coach Mike Nolan for the 49ers went ahead with the more laid-back attitude of Alex Smith. Nolan would later state that Rodgers' strong personality would clash with that of his own, so that was one of the big factors as to why the Niners chose Smith over Rodgers. And Smith's rookie year was awful, to say the least. Yes, he was put on a team that previously went 2-14, so there was room for improvement on all 3 sides of the ball, to put it nicely. He would toss a single touchdown, one, and 11 interceptions, completing just 50% of his passes and a league worst 40.8 quarterback rating. Man, that when you talk about one of the worst rookie years, definitely up there. Definitely up there. 2006 was a bit smoother. The Niners would move on from Kevin Barlow, thus making Frank Gore the lead back. They would also move on from offensive coordinator Mike McCarthy to Norv Turner. The Niners would improve to 7-9 this year following Smith's rookie season ending at 4-12, and his stats did improve across the board, so sign in the right direction. 2007 would have more turnover at the coaching position, however. Norv Turner would be hired by the Chargers, so Smith would have his 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 seasons, with Jim Hostler as the new OC. Unfortunately though, Smith would suffer a shoulder injury that would cause him to miss a few weeks at first, and while he would eventually return, you could tell something was really off with his mechanics, in a similar way that Baker Mayfield's last year with the Browns went. You could tell he was hurt, he was trying to play through it, but something wasn't right. Unlike Baker, Smith would actually miss the rest of the season as his shoulder hadn't repaired the way it was supposed to go. With that, his 2007 campaign was over. Now in 2008, the Niners have fired offensive coordinator Hostler, so now we are on our 4th offensive coordinator in 4 seasons. However, injuries continue to be the downside of Smith's career, as in 2008, he doesn't even step on the field. It would turn out that that same shoulder that was broken had a bone in there that was still unhealed. So his 2008 campaign was gone. In 2009, Smith wasn't promised anything, as he had to restructure his contract just to remain on the team, and he would have to fight for the starting position with new head coach Mike Singletary and new offensive coordinator yet again in Jimmy Ray, marking his 5th in 5 seasons. Smith would actually lose the quarterback battle, but due to Sean Hill's struggles midway through the season, was thrust back into the lineup. This would result in Smith's most productive season to this point. In just 10 games, he would toss 18 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, an 81.5 quarterback rating, and a career-high 213 yards per game. The next 2 seasons were as up and down as it gets. In 2010, despite keeping the same offensive coordinator for the second season for the first time in his career, Smith would regress and ultimately be benched for the likes of David Carr and Troy Smith. His record was 3-7, while the Niners as a whole finished 6-10, firing Singletary in the process. And it's crazy to think that Mike Singletary being fired may have actually saved Alex Smith's career. Like, we wouldn't get the rest of his career had it not been for this firing, because the new head coach in 2011 would be none other than Jim Harbaugh. And if you know anything about this guy, you know wherever he goes, the man is a winner. Under Harbaugh, a new version of Alex Smith had now been unlocked. The Niners would finish with a 13-3 record. They would go on a somewhat deep run, skipping the wild card, then defeating the Saints in the divisional, but would ultimately lose in the NFC Championship on a play, or I should say a couple of plays, of terrible ball handling skills by special teams. For the start of the 2012 season, Smith and the Niners would pick up right where they left off, going 6-2 before Smith unfortunately would suffer a concussion. This would open the door for the more younger and more explosive quarterback in Colin Kaepernick. And long story short, since Cap was playing great, this would lead to the Niners just keeping Cap in the lineup for the rest of the season. With Kaepernick under center, the Niners would make it all the way to the Super Bowl, thus making Smith expendable. Despite Alex Smith being on pace for career highs in the majority of stat lines in 2012, San Francisco would move on finally from their former number 1 overall pick. Smith would be dealt to the Kansas City Chiefs, which would turn out to be the best case scenario for him. After OTAs and training camp, Coach Reed would name Smith the starting quarterback for 2013. Smith and the Chiefs would start out running out the gate, winning their first 9 games to begin the campaign. And despite a shaky second half of the season, the team managed to finish with an 11-5 record and would clinch a playoff berth. They would end up playing the Andrew Luck-led Colts in a losing effort, but through no fault of Smith, because he was on fire in this game, tossing 4 touchdowns to no interceptions and just under 400 yards passing. Smith would earn his first Pro Bowl nod thanks to these great statistics, as he had career highs in both passing yards and passing touchdowns. Over the next 3 seasons, the Alex Smith-led Chiefs were perennial playoff contenders. Smith would start to add up some Pro Bowl nods. He would have great numbers, always in the bridge of being a top 10, top 12 quarterback each and every year, and his teams would always make the playoffs, if not very far, but they always made it. However, this now brings us to the 2017 season. Like I mentioned before, everyone thought Alex Smith was a great, if not solid, quarterback. You could do much worse than Alex Smith. But with this guy, you knew now that there was a ceiling. And it seemed like the Chiefs would agree, as with the 10th overall pick in the 2017 draft, the Kansas City Chiefs would select Patrick Mahomes. By this point, it felt as if Smith was auditioning for his next gig. He would make the most of his run by tossing career highs in both passing yards, surpassing 4,000, and career highs in passing touchdowns, which was 26, with just 5 interceptions and a career high 104 passer rating. Smith would earn another trip to the playoffs and another Pro Bowl nod, but would lose to the Titans by just a single point. Despite 2017 being his best numbers throughout his now 12-year career to this point, Smith was once again traded. This time, however, he was sent to the Washington Redskins. Smith was immediately named the starter and actually had them in a pretty good spot. Through 9 games, they were 6-3 and had a decent shot to make a playoff run. However, things would take a very dark turn in Week 11 against the Texans. Smith, to put it in the least complex terms, would break his leg in the most devastating way possible. Like, if you look it up online, it is gruesome. I'm not putting it on screen. Y'all can look that up. And not only was this a horrific injury, but it was very ominous that it would happen exactly 33 years after the former Skins quarterback Joe Theismann would suffer a similar injury that would end his career. Yes, the injury was awful. The worst was yet to come during surgery. Alex's leg would be infected, and it was so bad, it even became life-threatening. Over the next 9 months, Smith would endure 17 more surgeries to combat the flesh-eating bacteria that developed in his leg. Doctors even considered amputation. Thankfully, things never got to the point of amputation, but Smith's career was now more in jeopardy than ever. He would be out for the entire 2019 season, but miraculously, in June of 2020, doctors would clear him to return to football activities. It was very understanding that Washington wanted to ease Smith into the lineup, but after an injury to Kyle Allen in Week 5, Smith would return to the field for the first time in nearly 2 years. Over the course of the 2020 season, Smith would start 6 games and would go 5-1 in the process. Yeah, his numbers weren't what they once were, but just the fact that he returned from such a gruesome injury to win 5 of 6, Smith would easily earn Comeback Player of the Year in 2020, and he would subsequently retire in March of 2021. With us now going over everything that happened in his career, you understand why I said this was the most up and down career I've covered thus far in the beginning. Given that that's the case, we have to now finally circle back to the original question. Just how good was Alex Smith actually? Alex Smith couldn't catch a break at the beginning of his career. Between injuries, a revolving door at offensive coordinator and head coach, it was hard to get anything going. Most guessed by 2008, Smith was a bust in the NFL. Yet he would do enough to be given another chance. He also saved his own career by taking a pay cut early on that kept him around long enough to be united with Jim Harbaugh. This was enough to draw interest by KC, who, with Andy Reid, was able to carve out the best years of his career. And despite what happened in Washington, when he was on the field, Washington was a winner. He had an 11-5 record with them and came back in his mid-30s and came back from a catastrophic leg injury that could have had him amputated or even dead. So with the rough start to becoming a 3-time Pro Bowler with the Chiefs, to Comeback Player of the Year with Washington, and hell, bonus points for holding off Patrick Mahomes for a year. If I had to give the grade of the career of Alex Smith anything, I'd have to give him a B. But what do you guys think? What grade would you give the very up and down career of Alex Smith? Would you factor in the fact that he was picked over Rodgers? Let me know in the comments below. But that's going to do it for me, ladies and gentlemen. It's been Triple DS. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And if you're still here, please consider subscribing. It would go a long way, and we appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning in. With all that being said, until next time. Shoot, boy!